Hello, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in to AADL TV. Our show is Biblio Files, and each week myself and a few coworkers take a few minutes to answer one question about books. My name is Amanda, and with me, as always, is Christopher and Lucy. And today we have a special guest once again. We have Ellie joining us today, and the question we are asking is, what's a favorite youth fiction book? Fiction, nonfiction? What's your favorite youth book? Tell us about it. Lucy, what are you sharing with us today?
Well, I had a really hard time narrowing this down. I didn't know if I should go with like something I loved to read when I was a youth or something that I've read as an adult. So I went with something that it's both. I mean, this is Anne of Green Gables, and I spent most of my childhood with my nose buried in this book or one of the other in the series. There's a whole series about Anne. And so I would say that this book kind of created me it made me the kind of reader that I am today, which is basically like someone who reads deeply, who rereads the same things, like to find your favorite lines, who gets really carried away by a story. And one of the great things about Anne of Green Gables is that it is filled with strong female characters, most specifically Anne. This is a girl who she guards her own opinion very fiercely, so she's not going to let someone tell her how she should think. She gets mad. She's very spirited. She finds joy in simple things, but she doesn't ever behave in a way that someone's like telling her to behave. And I think that that's a really good message. Like, girls are as good as boys. This book definitely shows you, and it was written in long time ago. It was written in 1908. So that's a pretty good message for back then. And then there's another really great woman right from the onset, which I noticed when I reread it as an adult, which is Anne's adoptive mother. She doesn't really warm to Anne initially, and the arc of that relationship just really shows another unique female who kind of grows into motherhood. So I've reread it as an adult and loved it just as much as I did when I was younger. I could talk endlessly about this book, but I would just say it's a great piece of youth fiction, and one of my all-time favorites. So Christopher, what do you have today?
Well, I have not read a lot of youth fiction or YA fiction, but I asked my daughter for a recommendation, and she gave me On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. So this is Angie Thomas's second book, and I loved it. I devoured it over the weekend, read all 435 pages of it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think one of my favorite parts of the book is when she is writing her first song. She's recording it, and Angie Thomas kind of walks you through what the main character is doing and thinking and how she's writing that song. I thought that was a really neat part of the book. But in general, her characters are so alive, and the story is so interesting, and I think it's a great example of what fiction can do. It really puts you in someone else's life and shows you their world from a different perspective. So I really loved it. We've talked about The Hate You Give, the book, and I really want to go back and read that now because we've talked about the movie and how much I like that. So, Ellie, what do you have for us today?
Yes, you guys, I'm so excited to be here. I do just want to say, I think it's funny that, Christopher, you said the characters are so alive in your book, because in my book, it's the opposite, but for a different way. Because the book that I want to talk about is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. It came out in 2008, and it has beautiful illustrations by Dave McKean. And it is essentially, without giving away too many like plot points, I think it's fair to say this because it happens in like the first 2 pages, but it's about this boy who doesn't have his name. So his name is Nobody, and he goes by Bod. So it's about Nobody Owens. And when he is like 2 years old, his whole family gets murdered. And it happens like first page. And while the man named Jack is, killing his family members, the toddler, Nobody, crawls out of the house and into a graveyard. And the ghosts of the graveyard kind of adopt him and take him and make him one of their own. So it's this like whimsically spooky, like slightly scary book about this boy just growing up in a graveyard. And it has like very heavy themes of like chosen family, and I just love it. I reread it every single year. It's beautiful, and one of the perks of this human boy growing up in the graveyard, being raised by ghosts and ghouls and all the other stuff, is that they give him the freedom of the graveyard. So they give him like ghost powers, but since he's a human, they're like dimmed down. It's great. Read it. I love it. Amanda, what's your book?
Yes, so I do want to say that I also really enjoy the Graveyard book. The book I want to talk about today is the book called Rooftoppers by Catherine Rundle. It's not a book I see a lot of people talking about. I don't hear a lot of buzz about it, but it's such a good book. The premise is the premise is basically a baby is found on the side of the English Channel in a cello case, and there's a man aboard the ship where the cello case most likely came from, and then he ends up taking the girl and raising her. The book is historical fiction. It is realistic, but it has some fantastical, larger than life sort of themes. So this young girl, she lives and grows up with her guardian, Charles, who is a scholar, and the dialogue and the prose in the book is just so good. Like even from the get-go, like it starts out and it describes the girl, the baby, her hair is the color of lightning, and her smile is that of a shy person. So just the words of it, and when I was reading it, I was so in love with like every other sentence was so pretty. So basically the baby stays with Charles, and then when she turns 12, this takes place in England. The people in charge of things come to his house and decide that he is unfit to be her guardian. A single man should not be raising a 12-year-old girl heading into womanhood. So the plan is for them to take her away and put her in an orphanage, and she wants nothing of it. So she decides she's going to look at the cello case for a clue and try to find her mother, and she finds a clue in the case, and they end up going on this giant hunt. And then she meets these other kids who bop from rooftop to rooftop. That's why it's called Rooftoppers. It sounds like a strange premise, but it's just so delightful, and it's so well written. It just has this magical, even though there's no magic, there's just this young girl who is so strong, and she just has such a twinkle in her eye and like a twinkle in her heart, and that is how her guardian Charles is too. It's just a really, really great book, and I just want to shout from the rooftops about Rooftoppers. I love recommending it to kids like 4th grade to 8th grade. It's great for adults too. It's just such a fun book. I read the book. It came out in 2013, and I read it around that time. So it's been a while since I read it. And I actually listened to the audiobook. I'm not a big audiobook person, but I listened to the audiobook again this week just to refresh my memory for it. And listening to the audio was fine, but I really wanted to read the words. I missed reading the words because the words are so pretty when they're put together. It's just lovely. So Rooftoppers was my youth fiction book for this week. Any other final thoughts from anybody? No, there's crickets. All right, so there you go. You've got 4 youth fiction titles to get you going for the winter. Thank you so much for joining us here for today's episode of Biblio Files. We will be back again next week. And next week we are answering the question, what's a book you didn't finish, but you quit very close to the end? It happens sometimes. So that's what we're talking about next time. Thank you once again for joining us here on AADL TV. Take care.